This week,
The Wilkes-Barre
cots,
Council of
mattresses,
Newspaper
a
Unions
refrigerator, and
speaks
stove
for the
all
4 unions at the Times Leader. This afternoon, the council held a press conference to explain what they think has been happening at the paper since Capital Cities Communications took over.
A bold, blatant campaign to break 4 unions at the Wilkes-Barre Publishing Company is being made by Capital Cities Communication Incorporated.
Management is clearly anticipating a strike.
Well, the Cap Cities bought the newspaper, the Wilkes-Barre Publishing Company, in May of 1978, and almost immediately preparations began. They were preparing for a labor dispute even before contract negotiations began. Situation became very tense.
As our contracts were expiring, or had expired, and we were in negotiations with Cap Cities, it became clear to us that they were not really seriously interested in reaching agreements with us. That was our feeling. I walked in and said, folks, we are going on strike against the Times Leader. Let's go.
But on October 6th, the Wilkes-Barre Council of Newspaper Unions, the governing body created by the 4 local unions, settled on the strike beginning on Friday, October 6th, 1978 at 5:45, and 2 members of the Unity Council, Pat Rushton from the Newspaper Guild and Jack Hooper from the Typographical Union, actually went into the building. Jack Hooper had a whistle, blew the whistle. They said, okay, this is it.
But what it does say is the possibility is being looked into for the strikers to publish their own newspaper in the event of a strike. And of course, it is likely that the company will publish a newspaper using management personnel. So on October 1st, Wilkes-Barre could have not 1, but 2 newspapers.
So you guys go on strike on Friday. By Monday, you're publishing in the Citizen's Voice.
Yeah. and
Did you have a big role in that?
I was part of it. Obviously, it was planned. We had, we knew that we needed to come out with a newspaper ASAP because.
And the initial expectation was that the first press run of the first edition of The Voice, which was Monday, October 9th, would be maybe 30,000. Remarkably, we had to print 45,000 copies of that first edition. And a large reason for that was the circulation people. Immediately when the strike started, they couldn't do it beforehand, it would be illegal. But immediately that Friday, they got on the phones and started calling their carriers. And at that time, most of the newspaper delivery was done by youngsters, young men, teenage men and women. And I think it was like 95% of the carriers switched allegiance from the Times Leader Evening News to the Citizen's Voice to build that remarkable first day of circulation. And why was that? Well, these kids, Dad belongs to a union, or Mom was in the ILGWU, the Garment Workers Union, for example. So there's a strong union background. They all had grandfathers and great-grandfathers who worked in the mines, were members of the Mine Workers Union. And that sentiment and that union heritage and tradition was strong in the families in Wyoming Valley. And that carried over. in 1978, and Dad told to say, hey, you're not delivering a scab newspaper, you're not delivering the Leader, you're going to be delivering the Voice.
So now I'm in eighth grade, and the strike comes along, and instantly every single one of my customers switched over to the Citizen's Voice. If you think about it, the newspaper boys were right on the front line of the war, because we're the ones who are delivering it. So when I hear that 95% of the newspaper boys and girls switched over to the Voice, I'm not surprised. No one actually told me to switch, even though I come from a union household, and that was being the union paper. I think at that time, in 1978, was the first time I ever heard the word scab.
We would be next door, in our newsroom over the #1 pub on the 2nd floor, and there would be a picketing schedule right on the wall.
Okay.
So I'd be sitting there and, working on a story, and my turn to go out and picket. And I'd go out and I'd, do my hour or whatever it was, I'd picket, and then I'd come back in. And whether it was an ad salesperson, a printer, everybody, there was a picket schedule.
And you guys did that, you think, for years?
A couple years. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and everyone received the same benefit, whether you were a maintenance man or designated as to be the publisher.
And we had a lot of support from the ILGWU. Those ladies who were out working in those, dress shops for all those years, and the mines at that point really weren't significant. But you had the kids and the grandchildren of the miners who remembered their dads and their grandpops were strong union people. That played a huge role in the success of the paper. And honestly, Bob, it was more, in my mind, it was more that than the quality of the newspaper. It really was. Those people were going to support the union and the union paper.
Yeah, this was historic. This was historic.
It was chaotic. It was all the people there. And the adrenaline was high. We're going out on strike. There was a lot of people out there. I mean, they locked the door when we went out, but it was the guards at the fence. It was their mere presence there, Bob, that I know, really enraged many people. You gotta remember, this was a family-owned company prior to this. I do know that paint was thrown on the front of the building. It was there for a long time, and they left it there on purpose.
So, and one of the things that the newspaper companies were doing at the time was stealing bundles. So the bundle that was dropped off, in my case at Hazel and Newport Street, would be stolen. And you can only guess who's stealing it. Both papers were stealing it. And I can also remember at the time that the leader was thrown indiscriminately free everywhere they went, regardless if you were a customer or not. And I can distinctly remember people just picking it off their front porch and throwing it back out in the middle of the street.
But you don't see locally or nationwide the types of really big historic strikes taking place anymore.
This paper was never meant to be permanent, right?
Never. It was never meant to become what we have here today. It was a tool. It was a negotiating, bargaining tool, to show them that we would put out a paper in an attempt to bring them to the negotiating table in good faith.
And I think when we brought this up last time, it was funny, but the New York Times story that I was reading about from November 1978 called the Voice, at least initially, a slapdash operation.
Well,
and in particular, they pointed out how you guys collected the national, international news.
yeah, we didn't have wire services at the beginning, obviously, so we had a fellow who was the national news wire editor on the old newsroom before he went on strike. So during the day, he would listen to the radio, watch TV, and he would take notes on national, international news, then come into the newsroom at night and type them on a typewriter and off to the composing room. That was our national, international news report until we got a wire service. So yeah, we slapdash, yeah, why not? It pretty much was an old-fashioned newsroom with the clicking of the typewriters.
It was a battle. It was battle's the wrong word. War of public relations. We both were good at it. I think we were a lot better at it. Guys like Paul Golias were terrific at public relations, and I think the thing that surprised us the most in the beginning was how the people in the Wyoming Valley swarmed around us. And and here we are 40 years later, and they're still sticking with us.
was an ugly situation. I'll never forget it. It was May of 1993. We were called to the back dock of the building for some kind of an announcement of some sort. Everybody walked outside on the back dock, and the doors were locked behind us. And we were told at that point that the Sunday Independent has ceased publication, and that we would be escorted back into the building with a guard to get our personal belongings, but that the Sunday Independent was no longer. So that happened on like a Wednesday, and the Times Leader had bought all the assets of the Sunday Independent and had a Sunday paper. The Voice at that point had to come out with a Sunday paper on basically 3 or 4 days' notice. So we went from having a deficit of about 8,000 to an advantage of about 5,000 on the daily side. On the Sunday side, it's actually a bigger picture. I mean, this is frightening. If I'm a Times Leader person, I'm saying this is frightening. Back in March of 2000, their circulation, Bobby, was 51,500 to our 30,286. I mean, they were almost double our circulation. Today, fast forward 10 years later, we're the circulation leader again. Our circulation is 23,000, theirs is 20,000. They've been in a free fall on their circulation. This is an amazing story. Credit to everybody at The Voice, from circulation to advertising to ownership to editorial to our carriers right on down the line.
This is such an interesting market, and for years I've told anyone when they talk to me about Wilkes-Barre that it's a fun place to be because there's a ton of great news, and it's not always happy news, but there's always something worth covering. Being in a competitive market is interesting too because you've got the daily scorecard. You know where you stack up against the competitor, and I'm really grateful for what the founding fathers of this newspaper did. They built something really special here, but for years they had to be worried about surviving. It was different for me when I got here. I wanted us to shift gears and not be focused on just surviving, but being winners. The people who started this paper sacrificed more than I know. I mean, think about it. They started this back in 1978. I didn't step foot into the building until 2004. It was well established. I don't know the personal pains they went through, but I know that they certainly sacrificed things to build this into what it is today.
Obviously, the Times Leader goes from a family-owned company to a big corporate conglomerate. Mm-hmm. So right from the beginning, you guys start this paper against these big corporate conglomerates, and you fought against big corporate conglomerates basically your entire career.
Well, they went from, don't forget, Capital Cities, which was a big conglomerate, sold to Disney, or to ABC. And then ABC sold to Disney. So, yes, from day one, we were going against corporate America. I think the original strikers, I'm not sure how many of us are left, should be extremely proud of that. When I say that every morning when I get up and I get the paper, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. I really am. It's something that we accomplished, and nobody gave us a chance. Nobody.